what I'd like to do firstly is just take you through a little bit of background before we speak to Martyn in about 5 minutes' time, and I'd like to take us through the main element of the programme this morning. The work we're doing within the FEA is all based around the 3 I's that stand behind everything that we do, but we very much focus that around the needs of coronavirus. And there's a strategy that's been approved by the CESA Council, sorry, the FEA Council, in order to allow us to deliver that. There's been a huge amount of political action, both direct and indirect, direct links with BEIS, who have been leading a lot of the work with government in terms of what we've seen going on, and also with the likes of CBI and the IOD in terms of that indirect action. And certainly you've also, I hope, seen the work that we've done with CEDA Bond and NC in putting together a cross-industry position in terms of what our needs were from government. And we've had strong, very positive feedback on that. What I would like to also reference is the work that we're doing across the whole of the team. And that's myself, through Jocelyn Carr in terms of the membership and events development work, and that's involved a lot of strategic work there. Through Adam in terms of what he's done with our marketing, communications, and also our social media. We've uplifted that to get the widest possible FEA message out into the market. And also through Sarah Jane, who's been the main communication source, and all of those primary contact emails that you'll receive and get come through her in terms of what she's administering on our behalf. But a couple of points on there. The decommissioning guide we've put out is on the website, so if anybody needs that, they can get hold of that. We will be launching today FEA Stats, which is a weekly forward order book reporting scheme of statistics, confidential to only those companies that participate. If you're already in the FEA Stats scheme, it's an extension to that, or you can join just that forward order book scheme if you want to. Our collaboration with consultants, and delighted to be working with Martyn this morning as the first of our series. There'll be another one from Citation next week, and others that will roll out after that, as we keep in tune with what your needs are and how we can respond to what those pressing issues are that you're facing out in the business at the moment. And the training education work that Jocelyn runs through CFSP and Principles of Foodservice, we'll look at other means of developing and delivering that over the coming months, as we're all in a very different working environment. And all of that's bound with extensive press coverage. But what I would say is the product group forums work is still ongoing. So any of the operational work day to day, please keep us informed of what your needs are there, and we'll be pleased to carry that forward. Just a quick pointer on the website, that's the home page. If you then go to the information tab along the top, there's a COVID-19 resource page there, which is all of the information that we're putting together. There you see the mothballing guide that Adam's put up. Also the BEIS links to the government website and the resource list underneath that. That will be continually added to. So that will be a go-to place for all of our work if you need a reference source. And just in terms of that mothballing guide or systems preservation guide, encourage everybody to circulate that as widely as possible across all their contacts. And indeed, if there's anything that you see that should be added into that, please let us know. It's a live document. We want to keep it up to date, and we'll reissue different editions as required. And as and when the time is not right, and we hope it won't be too far away, there'll be a recommissioning guide. So again, any feedback that helps us compile that, please send that through to Jocelyn, who compiled this for us in the first instance. So just to finish off, really what we're looking to do as the FEA on your behalf is garner that knowledge and thought leadership that we have across the breadth of our membership, get that single point of voice for the industry, and look after those shared values that we've all got as we work through the difficulties that we're facing at the moment. And in doing that, have the strongest possible voice to secure jobs, livelihood, and the businesses that exist within our industry. And then when the time is right, and hopefully it won't be too long, to help businesses re-emerge from what we're in at the moment. So if you have any points relating to any of that, please talk to me or any of the team. It's business as usual whilst we're all remotely working. We haven't furloughed anybody. There is so much that's driving our work at the moment. We need the fully resourced team to deliver that. So thank you very much for listening. And what I'd be delighted to do now is hand over to Martyn Drake. Martyn is from Drake Consulting, an associate member of the FEA. And Martyn has helped us with a number of very business-focused seminars over the last 18 months or so, which are looking to help business face into the particular issues of the moment. And obviously none more pertinent than what he's going to take us through this morning. So thank you very much for listening. And Martyn, delighted to hand over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Keith. And thanks for everyone coming. I think that I'm about to appear reflected through Sarah Jane's PC, so you'll see me. There's a couple of slides that I want to share. So what I'm doing at the moment, everybody should have access to chat. So there's a little box on over your screen that looks like a little comment bubble. So if you look in chat, I have just posted an online link to the slides that I'm going to be using. The reason I've done that rather than screen share is that so that you can choose. You can choose whether you want to look at me and your colleagues on the call, or whether you want to look at the slides. You can flip between them, either on your desktop or between apps on your phone, because it'll open the browser window for you. So hopefully you should see the slide. If you can't see them, don't worry, I'll talk through stuff. But ideally, we'd like to make this as interactive as possible, so as if we're in the room, and it's difficult because I know we can't all see each other, but use the chat. So I will take questions all the way through this. I've got 4 topic areas that I just want to talk about, and you'll see that on the slides, but it's basically immediate priorities, the new normals, whatever they may be and whenever they may arrive and what they might look like, what's going to separate those people who get through this and survive versus those people who get through this and really thrive, are in a really good position to make the most of the situation, and what you can do now during this lockdown phase to prepare yourself to come out better, to come out stronger. I guess that's the title of the seminar, is to come out stronger than you went in. So I'm going to talk around those 4 areas, but as we go, I will stop, we'll take questions, we'll have discussions if we want to, and try and treat this as much as possible as if we were physically together. So if you have any burning questions or initial thoughts or initial challenges, etc., put them in the chat now. Just drop them in as we go, and Keith and I will pick them up. So, like I said, I'm going to start with the immediate priorities, because I think to do anything else is going to feel like a bit of a distraction, because these are the things that you guys are probably all looking at. And for those who know me, you know that I work across quite a lot of different industries, so I have an awful lot of conversations with an awful lot of people. And all of their issues are broadly in these 3 categories. All of the priorities that we are talking about are one of these 3 areas. It's cash flow, it's relationships, and it's strategy in longer term. And I would probably have found it surprising that so many people have put strategy in there as a really important priority right now, but it is. And the fact that we've got over 40 people on this call, which is about the future and coming out of this, is probably a testament to how seriously people are thinking about it. But it is a really, really important consideration, because a lot of the decisions that we're making in the very short term, decisions around cash flow, decisions around customers, decisions around staff, decisions around putting a stop on investments and all those kind of things, they are things that have a long-term context. They have long-term implications. And the more that you get a sense, get a feel, get the time to get your head around how this is likely to play out, how a reopening might happen, and what the future may hold after that, the easier it's going to be to make those short-term decisions in that context. And that's the difference between, I think, the people who will react very, very quickly to this and lock down and shut up shop and not really prepare for what's afterwards, just hope that at some point we'll reopen and it'll be the same. And the people that actually think about it and recognize that it probably won't be the same. Some of it will never be the same. Some of it will take a long time to become the same. And some of the things that you do now, the choices you make now, can make a huge difference on how you come out. But I'm going to start off with looking at these three areas. I mean, you all know your business. In terms of cash flow, I suspect that all of you are all over this and have been all over this for a week or two, if not more. But just some thoughts. So in terms of cash flow, you're broadly looking at three areas. You're looking at your creditors and debtors, your cash in and your cash out. You're looking at your ongoing running costs and any investments that you might have in the pipeline. And you're looking at ways to bridge the gap over the short term and still this stuff can find its way back into your business. So just some thoughts on these, that where you can delay money going out and where you can go after and hasten money coming in, and of course you should do, and you've got to do what you've got to do to keep your business afloat. The challenge is, I mean, the second point, relationships, it's there for a reason. This is a period in time when relationships are built and broken, where reputations are made and lost, and you will get time right now, and you will already be seeing this, and some of it you may have suspected, but you will learn what kind of people your customers really are. So behind whether their normal stance is aggressive negotiations or friendly handshakes or whatever, this will tell you what they are really like as an organization, as people, and you will remember that. You'll know that when we come out of this, you'll be thinking about what do you need to build in terms of protecting yourself, in terms of recouping some of your losses, particularly those, you'll get the ones that will let you into the conversation, the ones that will talk to you, the ones that will explain the situation, they'll look for some kind of short-term compromise that will see you both through this. And you'll get the ones that will do everything to try and screw you over. They'll knock you down on fees. They genuinely don't care whether you go under or not. And you'll learn that, but so will your suppliers. So all of the people that you're holding back payment on, they will be looking at you in exactly the same way. And I know you know this, but it's really important to realize that some of those suppliers will be replaceable and some of them won't. But your reputation isn't replaceable either. And when we come through this, in the same way as you will need your staff, and we'll talk about people when we get into the relationship space. But your first priority is to keep your business afloat. But if you take a blunt instrument approach to cash flow right now, you will create a lot more bumps in the road, a lot more potholes in that road that you're going to need to drive out of this in 2, 3, 6 months time, however long it takes. So you need to be really thoughtful about them. My key advice is you need to be more thoughtful about this right now than you would do in a normal cash flow crunch for your business or in a normal recession that's affecting this, because what we're seeing now is unprecedented. There are behavioral shifts going on, some of which will stick, some of which will change. Everybody's under a huge amount of pressure. Relationships will be key throughout this. And the more you burn right now to protect yourself, the more problems you will have later. And I know that sounds really obvious, but I just want to put it out there as, this needs to be top of mind. And it's similar with running costs and investment plans. So some of you are going to need to be really forensic, taking out as much cost as you possibly can. So I know people who are taking vehicles off the road, they're putting SORN notices in place so that they can get some road tax back, cut their insurance. All of those things are really sensible because a lot of small savings can add up. But I'm not going to tell you how to run your business. You know it far better than I do. But there are two areas within all of this space that you need to be really thoughtful. One is with your people, and two is with your investments in certain areas. So things like technology, things like innovation, things like new services, new models, and the like. Because as tempting as it's going to be, there are some of them that you're really not going to want to cut. Because those are the things that, again, they will probably determine whether you come out of here with a big potential to grow and thrive, whether you take market share in this process, or whether you come out a long way behind your competition, the people who've continued to invest in certain things and the people are therefore on a better footing. And that's why this final point, bridging the gap, I think is so critical. So just a quick sort of straw poll on the chat. Has anybody got anywhere with the business loan schemes yet? So either CBILS or CL bills. Has anybody got anywhere with that? Or speak if your microphone is not on mute. Has anybody made any progress? I'll take that as a no then. As far as I'm aware, this stuff is due to come on sometime within the next 2-3 weeks. And I know people who've got applications in right now, who bank managers are looking at it, but there is obviously a delayed process. So Steve, not yet felt the need to do so. My advice would be is to start building these relationships with bank managers, and we'll come on to how long this stuff might take. But I would, so the first thing is, I mean, I'm no financial advisor, but my advice would be there will be loans out there. They will be up to, I think it's 5 million for the smaller businesses and 25 for the larger businesses. They will, the way it's looking now, they will be 0%. They will be, if you shop around, if you first shop around and look beyond your own bank, there will be ones that are offering no arrangement fees, no interest, no early repayment. And start looking at it in reserve in terms of, you know, there is a process ready to go. We'll come on to the difference between plan and playbook later, but this is, you know, when and if you need to get urgent finance, you will need a process in place to grab that, because it will hit you quite fast. Okay, so that's the final point, is if you are looking at tightening finances, use that sort of bridging finance to give you flexibility, just so that it buys you time to make those more thoughtful individual decisions on things like creditors and debtors, on your people decisions, which are really critical, and on things like technology and innovation. So the second part, that if there's any questions or anything on there, just throw them up. I think if you're having problems, Nick, with access to this, I would, you know, maybe speak to Keith offline or ping me a note offline, and I'll send you some resources and see how we can set you up. The second area is relationships. This is the next priority that everybody I'm talking with is talking about, and I've put them in order of priority. So number 1, staff; number 2, customers; number 3, suppliers; number 4, investors; and number 5, the kind of institutional creditors, your banks, landlords, etc., HMRC. And that's really the order of priority that I think you need to focus on them. Firstly, staff, because without them, you will never get your customers back, your suppliers back on board, your investors paid, etc. So just in terms of that staff piece, quite a few of you I know are already into furloughing or looking at furloughing, and my advice is really simple. You need to look at your stars. So who are the best people in the organization and how you can keep them? And that may mean keeping them on staff and finding things to do. This is going to be a really jittery time for people. Found that, so just on the finance thing, I'm just looking at Rich's. Yes, it does change, vary by bank. There is a list on the, I can post a link at some point when I get a chance. There is a list on the web on the British Business Bank that shows you all of the banks that have been accredited to do this now. So shop around. So the key thing with staff is that you're going to need to think about 3 things. You're going to need to think about the real stars that you want to keep, and you're going to think about what your skeleton staff would look like as you're running through this. But most importantly, you're going to have to think about, when you're furloughing people, what is the implication of that? And I don't just mean in terms of the sort of the liabilities, you know, if you're still asking them to do work while they're on furlough, and then you get HMRC audit 6 months down the line, and there's a whole email trail that they've been working for you while you've been claiming benefits. And, you know, there are questions that I think, you know, ethically you probably need to answer yourselves around that sort of thing. I'm more thinking about, if you're partially furloughing a team, for example, how do the people that you're furloughing feel? Because for you, there might be absolutely clear rational reasons why you're doing that. But for them, they will feel, whether they understand it intellectually or not, they will feel an emotional rejection from this. They will feel an impact on their self-worth. They will feel that if you ever had to downsize and make people redundant, they will clearly be the first people out the door. There's an emotional impact on that they will carry with them that you need to manage. And, you know, formally, you don't have to treat this like a redundancy situation. But if you want to keep them on side, those are the kind of processes that you want to go through in terms of just really talking to them and really building that relationship, and particularly once they've gone. So while the pressure is going to be on for the people that stay in the business, you've got stuff to do. You're keeping yourself busy. The people who are on furlough, it can be more stressful because they've not got stuff to do and they've not got people to, to keep them busy. And we will all be going through this over the next 3-6 months. Every organisation on this call will have people on staff who either lose very close relatives or friends, or their very close relatives and friends lose people. So there's the emotional impact and the isolation that people will feel when they go on furlough is big. And you're going to need these people back in when you reopen your doors. Similarly for the people that you're going to keep on. This fluidity that we're seeing in the market at the moment, with sites, are they open, are they closed, are people working, are people not working, what's the government advice going to be this week, next week, etc. Are we going to lock down any further, are the restrictions going to ease off? All of those uncertainties, they are going to continue throughout this period of lockdown, and possibly, as we'll see later, for some period afterwards. So it's asking a huge amount for you guys here. The pressure is on you, the decisions are on you, and you've still got all this stuff going on around. If you're working from home, you may got kids that you're supposed to be homeschooling, you've got partners that also need to use the PC and that sort of thing. All of your colleagues will have all of those same pressures. It's the expectation that somehow you will all cope with this and you will all come through it, when some of your nearest and dearest you might not be seeing for ages and you're really worried about them. So all of your people, whether they're in the business or whether they're on furlough, they're going to go through difficult and potentially quite emotional times, and they have never needed you more than they will need you going through this, in terms of helping them to get access to whatever monies they should be getting access to stay in contact with their colleagues and friends, to socialize online. Any organization who's furloughing large amounts of people, if you can set up things like the beer night on video conference, or this is the time when you're learning the names of the kids of your colleagues and the people that you've furloughed. This stuff is really, really important, and particularly when those people come back into your business, it will feel different. So you'll have a set of people probably who have gone through this, who have developed a kind of shorthand in the way that they work. They will develop more of a team bond. They will have a faster rhythm, probably, in terms of making decisions. They'll have more familiarity with the kinds of technology that we're having to adopt right now, because they'll be using it every single day. Mm-hmm. So you need to think about the reorientation process of people coming back in. I mean, it's not a total induction, but it will be a challenge for them to come back in and to reintegrate. They will not just step back in to the environment you're in, particularly the ones who are changing more. So the bigger the organization, the more change that's going to happen over the next 3-6 months as you adjust to this sort of intermediate period, the more of a challenge it's going to be for them to reintegrate. So there's an awful lot to think about in terms of staff. And the big challenging decisions for you are going to be around who you let go and who you keep. But that's just the start of the process. So just Steve, 100% agree. Thank you for that. The next down the list, customers and suppliers. I mean, I put them in that order, but they are both equally important. And then behind that, a level below, I think, sort of investors and then institutions. The point of all of these is that those relationships will all be very important. And as the time stretches on, they could become critical. So for some people, banks and landlords will be critical right now. For other people, that might not be the case. It might never be the case, or it might happen in a few months' time. But the point is, in each of these categories, there will be critical relationships and there'll be less critical relationships, particularly when you think about the future. And so here's the thing, I'm going to talk about this in more detail in a second in terms of what the future might hold. But I'll just put a couple of things out there first. So in my view, and it's not just my view, there's a kind of broad consensus in sort of people in the medical and epidemiology areas. When we come out of lockdown, and we will, there will still be virus out there. The government cannot afford, and wouldn't anyway, keep lockdown until the virus is eradicated. When we come back out, the purpose of this lockdown is to flatten the curve. It's not to eradicate the virus. So when we come back out, it will be because the curve is flattened enough. So there will be lots of virus out there. There will still be lots of advice around social distancing, around self-isolation. There will be lots of stuff in the media, possibly scare stories, challenges around whether the government's doing the right thing in letting us out, etc. There will still be regular announcements from things like Downing Street about looking at the numbers and making decisions. There will be concerns around the sort of things we're seeing in China, potentially second waves, particularly as we go towards the winter. Most medical professionals are still talking about 18 months to a vaccine, largely because of the processes for getting these things tested and through clinical trials. So basically the uncertainty that you've seen over the last couple of weeks, will sites be open, will customers still be working, etc. It's unlikely that they will suddenly just go away. You'll get some sectors like pubs and bars and restaurants where they had a really clear closing bell, now you're shut, and they will probably have a really clear opening bell. So now you're empty, and now you're open, sorry. But for the rest of us, it will probably feel quite similar to the close down but in reverse, and probably take an awful lot longer to come through. And we'll talk about this in a minute in terms of why I've come to that conclusions. But what it means is the adjustments that you're making right now, and the reliance that you're having on those relationships with customers, that you're talking to each other, with staff, etc., that flexibility, that collaboration, that openness that you will have relied on possibly for the last couple of weeks, that is going to be an absolute premium, I suspect, for the next 3 to 6 months as these things start to settle back out. And that's why these relationships are really important. And that's why my advice will be to invest as much time as you can in managing and developing them and trying to create that sort of open collaborative dialogue. And I'm not giving you that picture of the sort of post-apocalyptic way out of this to depress you or to scare you, etc. I'm just trying to make the point that those people who've developed, found their solutions, found their ways through this over the last couple of weeks, those people are going to end up redeploying a lot of that learning and be probably even better positioned because of it over the next few months. So I'm just going to pause there and have a look to see if there's any questions. While the team are furloughed, can they be doing anything in terms of health and safety, etc., training? My understanding is no. My understanding is if they're furloughed, they cannot do any work related. If they want to pursue their own professional development, I think there are probably going to be grey areas around this. So if they want to pursue their own professional development separately, but if they're doing it through your business, my understanding is no, they're furloughed. They're being paid by the state effectively. They are not employed by you for this period, and therefore if you're getting them to do things for your business, for themselves, professional development, the sort of things that you would normally have paid time doing, then you could be in a spot of bother when it comes to HMRC audits, etc. And I'm sure there will be people who chance their arm. I'm sure there will be lots of phone calls to people who've been furloughed to see how they are, to see how the kids are, and to ask them about this contract that's all kicking off. I don't doubt that there will be those things there, but I think if you do significant amounts of this stuff in a formal way, you're leaving yourself wide open. Yes, they can do training. Right. Ashley says yes, they can do training. They can't do anything that will create revenue for the company. Okay, so I'm sure that Keith, at some point we can follow up on this in terms of getting some clarity of advice on what can and can't do. So does furlough restrict contacting clients if it's not revenue related? If they can train but they can't. So I think we're going to have to find our way through this, and I'll defer to Keith. Keith, have you got anything in terms of advice in these areas? Is there anything you want to say now? You need to unmute yourself.
I'll come back at the end, Martyn.
Say that again, Keith, sorry.
I'll come back at the end.
Come back at the end. So Keith's going to scurry away and have a look at that, and then he's going to come back at the end and see what he said. So in terms of, so those are the kind of top two things which I know that are on people's minds. So cash flow and relationships. The third one, which is strategy, I think, and more of a long-term thinking, is this is where it becomes different. This is where I think that there is more stuff for all of us to think about. So because of the uncertainty, the way that I'm talking to my clients at the moment is thinking about moving away from a plan and moving towards having a playbook. You know, the difference between those two things is a lot of people are very comfortable with having a sort of fairly rigid plan. We know what we're doing. You know, we've got a what Microsoft project or whatever it is. You know, this month, next month, etc. And we do things in phases. When you've got this level of uncertainty, there are certain things where planning is not helpful because the situation will change. You know, we can't plan for what announcement the government will make next week or the week after, but we can create playbooks for this. So you can create a playbook around, you know, what are you going to do if a customer refuses to pay you? And there will be different options around there, and you'll know what those options are. But do you have that as a playbook so that everybody understands that this is the option that we have, and this is the decision that we're making. This is how we're going to progress it. And like I said before, you might not need bank finance right now, but if it gets to that case where you do need it, do you know how to do it? Do you have a plan that you could switch on? Do you have this? A playbook is, you know, it just comes from the sporting term. So if, you know, I'm more of a rugby fan, but you know, if you've got a line out in rugby, you will have a playbook of different plays that you can make, whether it's going long or whether it's going short, or whether, you know, it's a 2-man line out or an 8-man line out. That's a playbook, and each one has a kind of a little mini operating plan within it. And during this process, what is your playbook for if you're working on site and you get a letter from head office that says all our sites are closed, and then you get an email from the site manager say this one's open, and if you're not on site, we're going to penalize you. Then what's your playbook? What are your plays for that particular situation? So my advice is shifting more towards this playbook mentality, that you have sets of plans that you can then choose. Playbook is about options rather than about process, and that's the difference. So moving from having plans and talking about plans to having playbooks and talking about options. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is to get serious about scenarios, and I'm going to take you through some scenarios in a second in terms of how this might play out. But the advice is to take those seriously and to plan and build playbooks based on those scenarios. And as some of you are in more kind of downtime right now, this is the ideal time to do this thinking. You know, if you're, God forbid, wondering what you're going to be watching on Netflix this afternoon, which I'm sure most of you aren't, but this is exactly the kind of strategic thinking that you guys need to be putting your time into. And the third one is to invest in innovation. So this is kind of different ways of doing things, different ways of servicing customers. You know, and you guys, we'll come into this in a bit, and you will already be finding solutions to the problems that you're having. You will already probably be getting ideas coming up from the front line about things that we could, or things that they're just doing differently themselves, you know, and capturing that and locking it in. But there are bigger plays to be made here in terms of innovation. The things that maybe you wish you'd done technology-wise a year ago that would have set you up better for today. The things that, if you knew that this was going to go on for another 6-8 months, the things that you would spend money on right now, so that your business can grow and take market share during this period, because other people won't be doing these things and other people will be falling behind. So investing in innovation, getting really serious about the scenarios into which that innovation is going to drive some success, and thinking about playbooks rather than fixed rigid plans, things that you can flex and have options on. Those are the kind of top line main pieces of advice. So I'm just going to throw it back now and look at the chat and get a sense of, are there other things outside of those 3 big areas, cash flow, relationships, and the longer term planning, that you guys have right now in terms of key priorities? Is there anything outside that I've not spoken about? I never know how long to wait with this. I'm going to learn this new technique, because people type at different speeds, don't they? But if there's anything anybody wants to say, feel free to say. I think most people are still on open mic, and you're doing a wonderful job, by the way, of being quiet, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for that. But if there's anything that you want to say in terms of reflections on those priorities before we move into the next bit, which is about, you know, the future and the new normals. Steve thinks that about covers it. Stephen, I like the sound of that. So I'll go with Stephen's view unless I hear differently. Okay, so let's move on then and look at, so where is this going to go? Where is this going to end? Now, the way that I see it, and there are different perspectives on this. So the CBI view is that this is just a normal, typical V-shaped recession. It's a deep one, but it's a V-shaped recession. It'll go down, it'll come back up, we'll bounce out of it, and all be as it was. When you look at other communities, that view, I have to say, that view does stand out as being very much at the optimistic end. So at the other end of the spectrum, you look at the big investment firms, they are much less optimistic. So the, you know, the kind of share investment areas, they are looking at a much slower pace and a much longer recovery. You know, it's really the difference in terms of pace and degree of recovery, whether it's a V shape, whether it's a U shape, whether they talk about an L shape. Some of them talk about, you know, is it a Japan's lost decade? For places like the US where they haven't got a grip of this, places like the UK where we're behind some of the other countries, and you know, there's certainly the Far Eastern countries and Germany and places like that, and you know, where we've got Brexit potentially coming in on top, etc. So there's a very different view within the investor community than there is within the CBI. Probably the most sort of sensible view that I've read so far, the one that seems most reasoned and most balanced, is from the CEBR. If you haven't looked at it, CEBR reports, so that's you know, the Economic and Budgetary Responsibility. They put out a report around a week or so ago, which is really useful. And what that talks about is we will see obviously a massive drop in this quarter in terms of GDP. They expect to see a recovery in half two, and it will be a good recovery in their view, because they believe that the government will do an awful lot of stimulus around VAT relief, etc., to try and drive that recovery properly. But they also see that this year's GDP will end up probably about 5% below last year's.